Hey everyone, welcome to another brand new episode of CPOV Autographs. I, of course, am still your host, Matt, aka Stormageddon. And really quick, before we get into this week's episode, I do want to promote again a brand new podcast that just started that I was the debut episode of. It's a podcast called Massively Affected. It is a Mass Effect podcast that asks the not so simple question, why Mass Effect? It's hosted by Josh Silverman, a good friend of mine, and I'm very excited for y'all to hear it. I've been playing the Legendary Edition quite a bit since it came out, and if you are a Mass Effect fan, it is definitely worth checking out. So again, that's Massively Affected, and you can get it wherever you get your podcasts. Now, as far as this week's episode is concerned, I am chatting with the incredible Lucas Brooks. Lucas has a brand new podcast called Suggestive Language. It is a live Twitch podcast. I was a guest on it. We recorded this episode before I was a guest, but due to pushing up certain episodes and trying to get certain things timed out right, it's airing after that. So the timeline is a little wonky, especially if you then, after this, go listen to Suggestive Language. But you can find that podcast on all podcast platforms as well. They are live every Monday, I believe, and then the opposite Wednesdays is the previous week's audio episode, and you can subscribe to it on your podcatcher of choice. But enough about pitching Lucas's podcast onto why this episode is important to me. Lucas is a genuinely delightful human who I've known quite a long time through various arts endeavors, and I've been wanting to have him on the show for a while, and so I'm so excited to be able to promote his new pod while having an incredible chat about his artistic career, why we both love the Nintendo Switch, and how nerdy we are about DuckTales. So without further ado, here is my wonderful chat with the handsome, talented, and charming Lucas Brooks. Excited to be talking to you. I haven't seen you in person since FlameCon. I don't even think it was the last FlameCon. I think it was the FlameCon before that, but I don't remember now.
No, I think
it was
the last FlameCon that happened, because I would have been at the one after that because I had a great time at the first one I went to.
Oh, okay. Yes. But for my listeners, I'm talking with the handsome and charming, incredible Lucas Brooks, who I'm very lucky to be talking to, and who is very charming. I'm being cheeky.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, but I'm really excited to have you on because we've worked in the same circles for a long time. We've collaborated on shows back when you were doing a lot more burlesque. Of course, before the pandemic, because there is no burlesque during the pandemic. Well, there is, but
there is. I haven't done much of it, but it's happening still.
Yeah, it's still going on. But I'm very excited because you recently started a podcast, and I've always wanted to have you on the show. And I'm glad that in quarantine, hopefully the diminishing quarantine, we were able to make the time. So why don't we start by you telling the listeners a little bit about Suggestive Language and what inspired you to start this podcast and live Twitch show?
Sure. So Suggestive Language came about because, I've been wanting to do a podcast for a really long time, and I had another one that was short-lived, and it might come back. I don't know for sure. But during quarantine, most of my saving graces were queer people doing podcasts. Like, that was my friendship circle, it felt like.
Right.
And I had been sort of sitting around on my bum, not really creating anything. And then I decided I wanted to sort of create the kind of space for others that had been huge comfort for me in these trying times. So, but before that had happened, I was sort of thinking about what other creative outlets I could have. Because I am also kind of known for reviewing sex toys, and I was like, what else can I review? What would I call it? And I was thinking of like recommendation, review, suggestion, suggestive language. That would be fun. Not for this, but that's a great podcast name. And then that sort of got the gears rolling. That's one thing I'm really good at. I'm good at coming up with random titles for things
Oh, that's
and
good to know.
then
That's a good skill.
figuring out what to do with them later on. Um, and that's kind of how a lot of the burlesque shows that I've produced, my one man shows, sometimes I just come up with a catchy phrase and then decide what it's going to be after that. So
Amazing.
that's how I ended up with suggestive language. Um, and I had a lot of questions for myself in terms of how I was going to do it. And I can't remember why I decided I wanted to do it on Twitch, but I became very quickly weirdly committed to the idea. And I think a lot of it is that, you're seeing a lot more visual podcasts these days. And I actually really like that format. Um, I don't know if that's a very broadly felt emotion, but it's how I wanted to do it. And Twitch felt like an appropriate venue for that. And I felt a little nuts for being so attached to the idea. But I'm a performer. I like doing things live, and I think that's sort of where I get my best energy boost as a performer. So doing it live, I think, gives me a good drive. And after my first episode went up, I hadn't noticed before, but I saw that Twitch actually had a talk show and podcast category,
Yep.
which I, of course, started using immediately. But I was like, oh, I'm not the first or only person doing this. For once, I'm okay with that.
Nice.
This is a useful tool. Great.
I love that. And so the show is, if I, is from what I've listened to, kind of interview format, but also talking about people where they've come from, interesting things from their life, and like beyond just interview. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about what makes yours different from the typical interview show?
Well, I do use a general interview structure for it, but I consider myself more of a professional, or sorry, a performative conversationalist in
Mm-hmm.
this element. And, asking performers and artists and educators about themselves is just the best way to get that conversation organically flowing.
Sure.
And I'm always encouraging people that if a tangent appears, ride it out. Because as a longtime podcast listener, I think tangents make the best podcast material.
I would agree.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah, I mean that's more or less the mantra of this show has always been kind of like casual conversations. Like I've done some more like note taking, bullet pointed interviews, but for the most part, I try not to work from a list. I try to just kind of chat, and like it's easy when I have folks like you or Victor Devon or like folks that I know to chat. When it's a complete stranger, it could go anywhere. But my favorite thing actually, and you should make this a game that you can try and do on your podcast. I love when guests ask me questions. But if I prompt them to do it, it's not as fun. But like I had a previous guest on the show, Mike Regnetta, when I brought up casually that I grew up in Staten Island, he was like, "What was that like? What's Staten Island like?" And like just started interviewing me about Staten Island. It was incredible, and it leans into your theory that organic tangents on podcasts are more interesting because they're more natural, right? Like they're not, it's the least like prepared kind of material.
And it's always when you can tell people are the most excited to be talking about what they're talking about, when they just completely veer off topic. And like there's one podcast I was listening to a lot, Doing Great with Vicky Vox, and it's just all tangents. And they're always like, oh, we got to get back to the show. And I'm like, no, keep going, ride it, ride it.
I love that. And I love that you're doing a live show on Twitch. I can Twitch stream, and I do often, in fact, Twitch stream, but I can't do the podcast thing live. And I don't know that it's that I'm not capable. I think it's more that because all of my podcasts are edited and because all of my podcasts kind of exist in these different genres, it's just felt more comfortable to me for them to be offline and then to edit them and then release them. But I've always admired people who do live shows because they're essentially what I started podcasting for. They're talk shows or they're like radio shows, right? Like that's essentially what the Twitch show is like your own late night talk show.
Exactly. And that's sort of, a thing that I emulate in what I'm doing, as even though I'm still sort of figuring out what I'm doing as I'm doing it. And for the audio release that comes out a week later in the more traditional podcast format, yeah, I definitely go through and edit out as many likes and ums as I possibly can. And sometimes things get a little less streamlined. Sometimes parts seem a little bit awkward. Sometimes we just talk for so long that I don't need all of it.
Right.
So I definitely chop some of that up for the audio. But I actually really like doing the live format, even though it's very untraditional. It's just what feels organic to me.
Sure. Well, and I mean, that makes sense. Knowing you and knowing your burlesque career, knowing your one-man show career, and that you're an actor, like, I think it's hilarious that we met through burlesque and then also later realized that you went to school with my spouse, Sarah Storm, and were in shows together, but like had no idea. I think we established knowing each other through burlesque first, and then she came to a show or something, maybe?
No, as I remember it, she introduced me to you at a show you were DJing for.
Oh, maybe that's your memory might be better than mine, but that sounds correct. I mean, either way, it's very funny to me that we would have met regardless through the burlesque community, but that you actually happen to know my spouse outside of that, having nothing to do with burlesque. You both went to the new school, correct? If I'm remembering
Right.
correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, Sarah was at the New School for Drama as a grad student. I was an undergrad at Eugene Lang College. And I had been tapped in to do a play that she was in by another actor director friend, because they needed. My understanding is that they needed a short guy.
Love it.
So I was like, but I was really excited to be doing a play at the grad school. I felt
Right.
really, really cool, and I had a great time doing that play too. Um, and it's funny though, because I think since I graduated, the New School for Drama now has a BFA program, and that's what I wanted so bad
Oh.
as an undergrad. So I was extremely salty when I learned that. But yeah, we had a great experience doing that play. At least I did. I think we had a really good time, and I felt really cool because I was hanging out with a lot of older actors, and we just had fun.
Isn't it funny how when we're younger, like age matters so much, and like you feel like you're with the cool kids because you're hanging out with older folks, and it's like as we get older, it's like, I'm old. I don't want to hang out with young kids. Screw the youngins. Leave me alone.
I mean, yes, I'm very much of that school of thought, but also like I think generally I mesh better with people who are older than me.
Yeah. Same.
So I think we were all on the same page in that it was a good fit for us all to be hanging out and stuff. When I was in high school, I got to do a college production of the Laramie Project
Nice.
because I was dual enrolled for my last year.
Mm.
And that was also a really good fit for me. So that's just sort of how I thrive, I think.
That's interesting. Yeah, and it's funny because like as an adult now, or finger quotes adult, whatever the hell that means at this point.
Barely.
um, I don't think about age that much, to the point where like I've been talking to folks in the video game industry a lot because I've been doing a lot of work within that industry lately, especially with with podcasting, and half of the writers I know are like at least 5 to 8 years younger than me, and I just forget because I don't really like, it's just not at the forefront of your mind. I feel like when we're kids, it's always like, I want to be older, I want to grow up, and then as an adult, it's like, I don't want to know how old you are. I don't care.
I don't feel like a grown up at all. I'll be honest with you.
Really?
Like, I'm still shook at the fact that like my parents were 5 years younger than me when they had me. I don't feel ready to take care of a plant. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think I'm hanging on to my youth fairly gracefully. I still feel like I've got a lot to be excited about in the future. So why call myself grown up when I'm still growing?
Fair enough.
I hope that sounded like a mature take on it, not like I don't want to grow up.
No, I mean I don't get that idea from you. And I think like I think it's also different for folks around our age, as I know that we are around a similar age. Because we're multi-hyphenates, because we do so much, especially since you and I are in creating content and in the arts, Like, I feel like that just, I can't help but feel younger, especially because I'm covering things like technology and video games and TV and movies and like things that I think make me feel youthful. I think that also will change. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I could be a crotchety old man and shake my cane with the best of them, but I think for the most part, I'm young at heart because of the hobbies I pursue. Do you think that's kind of part what keeps you younger too?
Um, I mean, that sounds fair. I hadn't really thought about it in that way. For me, I think it's mostly that I have a certain appetite for adventure in, for lack of a better term, and like as an artist, like as a actor, writer, whatever, I feel like there's always something that I'm going to be super excited about moving forward. Um, that sort of makes it hard for me as like a person working a day job that is so mundane and the same thing day after day. Because as an actor or a writer, if I'm working on something, I know that even when that's done, there's going to be something else to be excited about.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's an opportunity, not in 2020, 2021, but hopefully soon, there's going to be a lot more opportunity for things to explore and be excited about. And that, I think, is what keeps me feeling fairly young.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, also, like, I'm glad that you brought up the writing process and the hope of doing things in person again, as we all hope for that. But I wanted to shift the conversation a little bit about to your one man shows, which were phenomenal. And I'm curious now that you're Twitch streaming and you're doing the podcast live, have you considered either bringing back one of your older one man shows live on Twitch or writing a new one? Like, is that something that's anywhere in the brain space?
I've thought about it. I never really settled on anything. I think a lot of it is because the shows that I have that are written, a lot of them don't sound a lot like me anymore.
Right.
And I don't really have a plan for what they would look like. There have been had some ideas for other like solo theater projects that I could possibly stream that way. I made a it wasn't even a joke. It was like I just sort of like shit posted something last year because I was a dog walker for a year,
Mm-hmm.
and I always had all these pictures of dogs and people and was telling stories about the dogs on Facebook just for like my private friend group. Oh, and also it became a part of my hosting bits for when I was hosting burlesque shows, because on the shows I hosted monthly, Punk Rockin' and Pasty Poppin', anytime I needed to stall, and there was always at least one time per
Sure.
show,
Totally.
it would be like, okay, so there's this dog I know.
I love it.
And the first couple times I thought I was being the biggest dork. Then it got to a point where anytime someone was like, "Can you stall?" I'd be like, and someone would be like, "Tell us about a dog." So it became a thing. I sort of thought about doing a show where I talk about dogs I know, and I haven't seen those dogs in over a year, because I don't do that job anymore. Um, but I was like, that would be a fun thing to do on Twitch, just like do like a little sort of PowerPoint of the dogs that I've met. Um, but I haven't really planned out anything else of that matter. Um, I think a lot of that is, I mean, like in the last year, I've just been, as I say, foot stompy about the lack of stage opportunity.
Sure.
Like there are so many people who have done so many great things in terms of pivoting from the stage to the computer screen. And I applaud them and I envy them, but I just sort of flopped. And I did a couple shows. A friend of mine and I did a 24-hour burlesque show online. I was a part of a White Elephant show,
Mm-hmm.
but burlesque sort of took a backseat for me, and then I was just desperate to think of something else to drive me forward. So that's kind of where I'm at now. But I'm chipping away at the makings of a book and a adapted version of one of my one-man shows, like very slowly, because I just get so not focused these days.
Yeah.
And doing the podcast is sort of the only thing that keeps me on task. everything else just sort of vanishes into like random brain space. And then a month later, I'm like, oh, damn, I was supposed to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that completely. I think that in the pandemic, like, I'm very lucky that all of my podcasts were already remote. All of my co-hosts and I were already recording over the internet. So, like, that transition was pretty easy. But it still wasn't enough. Like, I had to start another show. Like, and so, like, in the pandemic times, I started a short form series for my video game podcast where a different host every episode talks about a game they love and why they love it. That's it. Super simple concept, like, and it became like my pet production project. And I hosted a couple episodes myself, but for the most part, it's a monologue that I edit and then release. And it's been so satisfying. And it made me realize how scatterbrained I was before it, because now I feel like I'm focused in on all of the shows because I have that as the through line of the one project that's mine. It's 100% mine from start to finish. Whereas I'm happy to collaborate with the people I do for my other podcasts, but you know, I don't know, sometimes I get greedy. I just want something to be just mine, you know? And I think that it's reasonable to want to do that, but you know, as the pandemic wore on, I still feel like sometimes I'm just tired for no reason, or sometimes I don't want to do a thing even though I love doing it. Have you had to combat those kind of brain gremlins that like just make you want to do nothing instead?
So many brain gremlins. Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, probably just a little over a year ago when things started shutting down, I was furloughed from my job for probably just like a week and a half, 2 weeks, but it felt like so much longer. And eventually I was able to go back just like 2 days a week to like find something to survive on. And then eventually I worked my way back up to full time ish. But you know, the days where I wasn't at work with something to keep me, you know, just out of my head, like I said, I just flopped. I mean, eventually, the good news was that Christmas beforehand, my parents had gifted me a Switch for
Yay!
the holiday.
Hell yeah.
So I definitely dove into gaming. I've gotten a lot more enthusiastic about it. I'm still not in a place where I can do it on Twitch because I have a freaking Google Chromebook and I did not know what a disadvantage it would be. But, you know, I heard about the thing the kids were playing called Animal Crossing and built me an
Yeah.
island and, um, you know, started exploring different games. Some were successes, some were not. But that definitely like kept me out of my head for a while, and it still does most days. But also like without any sort of stage time on the horizon, I have a hard time pushing myself to work on those projects, even though I have significantly more time I had before.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. And it's funny, it's like I don't know that I necessarily miss doing the live shows. I do miss it to a degree, but I think I miss the community more and like there are certain folks, certain friends that we all have that you don't talk to regularly, but whenever you saw them at a show every week or every month, you would have long conversations with them and hang out. And like you know, some of those friendships have developed into like Twitter friendships or Discord friendships, but not all of them translate. Sometimes you just don't see those people. And I miss that. I miss that kind of like interaction.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like my Boston burlesque family, there's only like 3 or 4 people I've kept up an ongoing, you know, social relationship with. And I do believe that there are plenty of people who I'll resume that relationship with like nothing happened.
Right.
But for now, it kind of sucks.
Yeah, totally. I do want to talk a little bit about burlesque. You know, I wanted, you know, truth be told, I wanted to bring you on to talk about suggestive language because I'm excited about it. I've listened to the first few episodes and I think I want more people. If I can use my platform to boost your platform, I love doing that. Especially as a fellow queer, because there should be more queer people in podcasting. There are not enough. There are too many straight white men, you know, and we're at least we're queer, right?
Yeah, but I'm also like I don't really listen to a lot of straight white men podcasts, so I just like forget they exist. Sometimes for me, it's mostly like the podcasts I listen to are like half drag queens, half just other queer people.
Amazing. I love to hear it. But I do want to talk about your burlesque career for a little bit because I mean I love your burlesque. I love your acts and I love your shows. I haven't gotten to see as many as I would like, but one of the acts that has stayed with me for the longest time is one of your nerdiest acts, which is, of course, your Jack Harkness act.
Oh yes.
Your Doctor Who act. I am a longtime Doctor Who fan, as you know. I've met the legendary John Barrowman once, which I don't still believe is real, but because he's unreal. But like, I would love to talk about how you created that act, because to me, I look at it and it seems like such a love letter to Jack Harkness and to Doctor Who. Was it just you were a fan of the show and really just wanted to recreate this character?
Not exactly. I mean, yes. And I think I was still kind of a new fan of Doctor Who at the time. But I had done a show at our bar, RIP,
R.I.P.
and producer was producing a Doctor Who show coming up. And as I was like saying goodnight for the evening, he was like, "You a Doctor Who fan?" I'm like, "Yes, I am." He's like, "Jack Harkness," and I'm like, "You actually asking me? Someone thinks I can be Jack Harkness?" And that was a huge thing for me. So I immediately said yes, booked it in my calendar. Was no way I was not going to do this. But for a long time, I was sort of uncertain how I was going to go about it, because I feel like there are several ways to tell a story about Jack Harkness.
For sure.
And originally, I was sort of thinking of just trying to tell like a whole arc in the act. But then I was going back and doing my research like a good artist. And I got to the episode with the Fabricator, where they're all trapped in reality TV shows, and I was like, "Oh my god, the act is right here."
Yeah, it's pretty much a burlesque act, more or less, in the show. Like,
and of course, I like chopped the bits up and sort of rearranged them a little bit to make a strip make sense. But I'd been thinking about this for weeks, and I had one idea. I was kind of like, "This is not great," and then I got that, and I went to Teddy Turnaround, good friend of mine, and also a Whovian, and I was like, "What if I did this?" He's like, "You have to do this." So that was how it happened, and it's evolved a little bit over the years, but I've been really grateful that I had a lot of opportunities to do it in different places. Boston is a city full of nerds, so I definitely had a nerdy show or two to do it for there. I got to do it at FlameCon, like we talked about, and I got to do it for the Nerdlesque Festival, which was a nerdy dream.
Yeah.
And what was also really funny is that I was taking a class at Esch Circus Arts in Boston. I was doing some sort of aerial class, intro level, and this circus guy who I had seen at shows at a bunch, he approached me and he told me that he describes my charm or my personality as Barrowman-esque.
Oh.
And I originally was like, he's saying that because he saw my Jack Harkness act. Apparently, he had not seen my Jack Harkness act, and this just came out of nowhere.
That's amazing.
So I was like, "Oh my god, that's like." It just it makes you feel special when someone connects you with a stupidly hot person.
Right, sure, of course. Well, what I love about that act is like, I knew you before I ever saw that act. And so, like, of course, my brain is still kind of doing the gymnastics. Like, I wonder what it'll be like when I see Lucas's act. But the minute you turn around, you do that spin, like, practically on your heels to the audience, the little, like, wink and nod that Jack Harkness does. And I'm like, oh, it's him. Like, he's him. Like, it just immediately wins the audience over, at least in my experience.
I love how you remember these details so much, too. I mean, I know exactly the moment you're talking about. But that's also because I watch myself a lot. So for improvement, but also for vanity.
Sure.
I always really enjoy that part when I go back and watch it. I'm like, that was kind of fierce. Yeah.
Shifting the conversation back to your writing and talking about suggestive language, what kind of, like, I mean, you don't have to give up the ghost completely, but I'm curious about your prep process when you bring guests on. Do you write a giant outline? Do you like do a ton of research? Do you let the information come out organically during the conversation? Like, because I've been on podcasts and I've done podcasts where there's no prep, some prep, a lot of prep, and I'm just curious where you fall along the spectrum.
So the way I have been approaching it so far has been that actually, so I started thinking about doing this show mid to late last year, and only just started actually doing it a little over a month ago. And everyone that I've had on so far has been someone I've known for a reasonable amount of time, except in the case of my first guest, who I'm only like becoming more and more acquainted with now, I still had months to think about what this is going to look like.
Yeah.
There are several people who I've had on already who I've known I wanted to have on even before I even had a podcast in mind. So that's a whole thing for me. And this is kind of my approach to hosting burlesque shows, at least the ones I produce. Like as I'm building the lineup, as they're sending me their music, I'm thinking about what I can say about this person or the character they're portraying and where else they can be seen, and just how much I can fluff their ego in whatever capacity before and after their performance. So with suggestive language, I've definitely given myself several weeks at least to think about what I'm going to talk about with this person. And I mean, there have been a couple exceptions, but usually I know that I have enough material on this person before I even ask them. And I was preparing for this. I listened to Shut Up, Evan, and I was listening to this one, and I sort of thinking about it as a host, and just because I listen to a ton of podcasts, and there's so many that I've heard where the host is just meeting the guest for the first time.
Yeah.
And it almost always works out, but the idea of doing that terrifies me. I know that someday, I believe that someday this podcast will be enough of a thing that I can ask people I've never met to actually be on.
Sure.
But right now, that idea terrifies me, and I'm only really asking people that I have some sort of a history with. Because that is, I do like sharing the memories I have with this person, and that's the kind of material that comes naturally for me.
Sure. I mean, that makes total sense. And like, I was where you were when I first started too. And there are early episodes of this podcast that were train wreck because the guest was uncooperative and it didn't happen a lot, but like there was a rock singer that I interviewed who just was one word answers most of the show. And like, it's such a short episode. And like, you just got to roll with it. But like, first of all, thank you for listening to Shut Up, Evan, and to this. I'm really proud of Shut Up, Evan. And speaking of queer shows, I mean, gay shit is in the tagline. But that's a good example. Like, I love producing that show and I love working with Evan. And Evan yells at me every time I say it's his show. He's like, it's our show. Stop it.
What was the episode I listened to?
yeah, exactly. And which is great. But like,
I love that moment. I was like, that's a good guy right there,
He's great. I love him. But when we were going to interview Retta, like, Retta is an idol to me. And like, I just was so nervous. And of course, I didn't tell Evan I was nervous. And I'm sure Evans had banter with her on Instagram, and I don't know how familiar they were, though they were fairly familiar with each other. But like once I was on the call with her, she was absolutely delightful and great and charming and funny. And like all of that worry went away. Or like even most recently with Anna Faris, like Anna Faris is a comedy legend. And when I knew we were going to interview her, I'm like, what the hell do I say to Anna Faris? And she starts the episode by saying that she loves our work. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I clipped that out of the raw audio and I have that on my drive for when I'm feeling low. Like, it was so awesome. But like, I think, and the advice I guess I could give for that kind of nervousness is, if you are picking guests that you are interested in, that have a similar heart to yours, even if you don't know them, they're going to be great because you're great, is my theory. If you're an asshole, they're going to be an asshole. But like, I think you'll be safe because you, Lucas, the person, have such a kind and warm heart that your guests are going to respond to that. I think that's going to be the safest bet. But I totally hear you. And I'm still nervous sometimes when I bring people on I don't know. Sometimes I get more nervous with people I do know because I'm like, what if I fuck it up? What if they hate me after? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm sure you have anxiety too. You know that doesn't have to be logical.
Yeah, that and then some.
With your new Switch adventures, I do want to talk to you a little bit about video games. First of all, I just have to ask if you've played Hades yet at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not. I don't quite get it as well as a lot of other people do. Like, I respect it,
Yeah.
but I also like get frustrated a lot more easily. And then like switch something else. But then I love watching people play it on stream. And I'm like, damn it, I should go pick that up again.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just the gayest game I've ever. It's just so gay. It's like everyone's beautiful, and everyone flirts with everyone else. Like that's what I love most about it. But it's really great. And like I thought of you once you mentioned you had a Switch because I'm playing it on the Switch.
I mean, I am a huge Greek mythology nerd.
Yeah.
Like I've got Apollo tattooed on one arm and Dionysus on the other. Like
Nice.
that's my shit. And I saw people talking about this game for probably about 2 weeks before I realized it was so like specifically Greek myth.
Yeah.
And, like just as a comparison, I heard about this musical called Hades Town, and I was like, I mean, eventually I actually realized what it was about. But whenever I hear things like that, I'm like, it's probably not what I think it is. I'm not going to get too excited and then just never look it up. And then I looked up Hades. I was like, well, god damn, this was made for me.
Yeah, I mean that was pretty much how I felt about it. But I'm curious, as someone who wasn't playing a lot of games and now has a Switch, have there been any like standout games besides obviously Animal Crossing, which we all relied on during the pandemic, that have like really jumped out as like comfort for you, or just things that you didn't know that you would like that you love?
Oh my god. Just opened a whole can of whoop ass right now.
Yeah.
Because I can talk about Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild for days. It was actually my birthday present to myself because I was still like, stuck at home a lot and I wanted to play a new game. And I've actually, no, okay, I was about to tell a lie, but it's only a partial lie. It was essentially my first Zelda game. I mean, I had played Link's Awakening.
Mm-hmm.
Got Link's Awakening a few months before that, and I enjoyed that. But it was like the first Zelda narrative Legend of Zelda game that I ever played. And I'd been eyeballing it for probably a couple months, but nervous because um, even before Switch, games that were like 3D,
Yeah.
like in 64 and onwards, I always got really frustrated with them because like with a side scroller, you can see what's in front of you and what's behind you, and that's all you need to know.
Right.
But like with open world and whatnot, like I'm always worried something's sneaking up on me and I hate it. But I was able to get past that with Breath of the Wild and just really fell in love with the just the world that was constructed and the storyline. Like I fell into a rabbit hole on YouTube of just like fan theories and whatnot about the whole story. And I mean, I haven't gotten through it, and I don't know if I ever will because I'm stuck at a part that gives me a lot of anxiety. But I'm really just obsessed with that entire story, and it's been a really in a time where you can't go on your own adventures. It's a really good one to have in your living room.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, Breath of the Wild was the first game I got on my Switch. I got my Switch a few months after it came out, and I don't think it's the best Zelda game ever made, but it's one of the best Zelda experiences I've ever had. What I mean by that is like there's not a lot of music, and I love Zelda music from its previous games, and like the story is there, but it's pretty stretched out over these flashbacks and the interactions, but the world is so alive. And like my favorite thing about playing that game is if you pick a direction, you will find a thing. It doesn't matter what the thing is, but like whether it's a shrine, a temple, a village, a Korok seed, literally, but something. You will always find something. And like even when I go back and still play my save file where I haven't found all the damn Korok seeds because there's too damn many of them, I still discover stuff, and I love that about that game.
I mean, I discovered a major area of the game the wrong way, but completely by accident, and I still think my way was better.
Nice.
Because, like, I was on top of one of the towers, and I saw like a hill really far away. I was like, I haven't been on that hill. Let's go over there. And then I ended up, I forget the area, but it was a giant cliff, and it was like jump at your own risk. I was like, I think I'm supposed to jump. And then it ended up being an easier way into Zora domain than the one I was trying to get to. And I saw the frickin' elephant robot shooting water up. I was like, oh my god, I found it. I
Nice.
didn't do it right, but I found it, and I think my way's better.
I love that. That's amazing. It's funny. I need to grab something because you mentioned Link's Awakening before because he's adorable. Where's the camera? Look at this little guy.
Oh,
He's just the cutest.
that's spot on.
Oh, it's so
Now,
good.
can you explain amiibos to me? Because I still don't get them.
Oh my God, yes. I would happily, as a collector of useless things, be excited and enthralled to explain Amiibo to you. So Amiibo, essentially, although I'm sure the video game nerds who are nerd harder than me will come for me later, they're essentially little statues, but they have microchips in the bases, and they started on the Wii U and the 3DS, but when you would put them over the joystick or over the touchpad, it would pull data and give you stuff. Like in Zelda, for example, Breath of the Wild, you'll get some food maybe, or like you'll get, some weapons. They'll just spawn when you scan it on the joystick because the joystick has a sensor in it. The Twilight Princess amiibo, and famously in Twilight Princess, Link can turn into a wolf, will summon a wolf version of Link to fight alongside you for a little while. Because you can tame the dogs in Breath of the Wild. I don't know if you know that. If you feed the dogs, they'll follow you around. So yeah, it'll summon a wolf Link to fight by your side. Things like that. And so like I collect them because they look awesome and they're really detailed. And like I also collect pop vinyl figures. So like I like.
I was gonna say they're kind of like Funko Pops, but with an extra function.
Right. But do I use them most of the time for their electronic function? No, they look nice on my shelf and I like them. But yeah, and certain games will come out with special edition ones that will give you limited items in those games. Like most recently, Monster Hunter Rise released one of the main monster, one of the boss monsters and two of the partners. And if you scan them, you get like special armor pieces that you can't get anywhere else, cosmetic stuff. And Nintendo's been selling them for years. There's no sign of them stopping. They are essentially useless plastic, but I love them just the same.
That's understandable. I have a small Funko Pop collection, and I hope I don't expand it too much for space reasons, but I got some really cute ones, so I'm just trying to find a more grandiose location for them.
Yeah, I have a ton of them. I don't know why I got into them. I just did. And like I have a huge variety, like everything from Marvel to like Ron Swanson to Star Trek to Doctor Who, of course. Like I don't know. I just like them. And Sarah has accepted this fate. I don't know that she is still happy about it, but she at least humors me and will occasionally gift them to me too. But
The three that I have are, I call it my Shrine of Purple Kings, because it's Darkwing Duck, Spyro, and Timatoa from Moana.
Amazing. I love that. Yeah, I actually
Figures
have.
they inspire me for weird reasons.
Sure, yeah. I mean, Darkwing Duck is great. Speaking of Darkwing Duck, and this now we're on a tangent. I don't know if you've watched the new DuckTales, the recent version.
I have.
So you saw the Darkwing Duck episode.
I specifically watched. Well, I started watching season 1 when it first came out, and I really liked it. And I kind of just like got distracted and stopped. And then I heard rumor that Darkwing Duck was on, so I immediately sought out the Darkwing Duck episodes, and then went back and like watched everything else before and after. I mean, I haven't finished the final season yet, but the Darkwing Duck episodes were my focal point.
Okay, yeah, because like for me, I was a fan of DuckTales and of course a fan of Darkwing Duck, and like I had started watching it like you when it first aired and then forgot about it. But I then watched in order. I still haven't watched the final season either because in protest I refuse to believe it's over because it's BS. Like especially since the creator said he had an endpoint. It wasn't going to go on forever. He had a plan and they ended it early. They had to end it early. It just drives me crazy. Anyway, but the Darkwing Duck episodes were so brilliant to me because they were so catered to Darkwing Duck fans.
Seriously.
And like, I guess if you don't want to hear spoilers for the Darkwing Duck episodes of DuckTales, which have been out for a while, I would skip ahead maybe 5 minutes. And then you could double back if you've gone too far. But like the fact that that episode ends with the original voice actor of Darkwing Duck playing an actor, the old actor, then like revealing at the end that he's become Negaduck is like so brilliant on a level that I was not expecting. I lost my mind.
I just did. I loved that moment so much, and also the following Darkwing Duck episode where Drake Mallard has actually become like a superhero.
Yeah.
Or is attempting to be one. But in the episode they have Chorus Bulba, and I was like, wow, that is a specific throwback, and I'm so here for it. Voiced by James Monroe Englehart. Amazing. I was like, I know that voice. I looked it up. I died. But then they also bring back, what was it, the Fearsome Four?
Yeah. Megavolt, Liquidator, Cracker Jack, and Bushroot.
Yes. I mean, I was just so happy in that moment. I mean, I didn't love some of the choices, but if I think about them as a reinterpretation, I'm more okay with it.
Yeah.
Because like, Bushroot is like mute thing rather than a quirky mad scientist. And I mean, I have to say, Liquidator is one of my favorite villains of all time ever. I didn't love that portrayal, but I respected it, and I was happy just to see it.
Yeah.
I got nerding out so hard right now.
No, it's fine. This is what I wanted. I mean, I'm a diehard Darkwing Duck fan. I grew up watching it. I loved it. And like, so I was so happy when the new show was going in that direction. There's still rumors of a full show happening, but nothing has happened yet. And like, I really liked the new cast for the most part. I thought it was interesting that they were actually from an alternate universe and like they weren't really real. And that helped like Launchpad and Darkwing to fight them. Like, I really liked, and of course, what's Stephanie Beatrice being Goslin was phenomenal. Like, the whole voice cast for the entire show, not just the Darkwing Duck stuff specifically in this DuckTales show was great. Like, I love David Tennant, and I've loved David Tennant in so many things, but I had no idea in my life that he was destined to play. His best role would be Scrooge McDuck, and he's just so good as Scrooge McDuck.
I 100% agree. And another one that really shook me was Lin-Manuel Miranda as Gizmo Duck.
Yes, one of my favorite characters from the old school cartoon.
Also, the fact that they made him brown for the show was very, like, that was a good gesture for this time, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, totally. And like, I mean, the cast is just unbelievable. Like, even the Dean himself as Gyro, and like, you know, like all of these incredible actors who do great voice work in other places, but to the all-star cast they put together for this show was astonishing. And like, it bums me out that it ended, but I love its run. And like, it also handled some stuff that the original show didn't really touch on really well. Like, first, you know, bringing the nephew's mom home, the reuse of the moon theme from the Nintendo game when she's on the moon. Like, it's
knew that, but I forgot.
It's such a brilliant dedication. Like, and it just gets me hyped and wanting to watch those old cartoons again. Like, I loved Gargoyles. My screwed up sense of sexuality and what I love and I'm attracted to is a mix of Demona and Goliath, 110%.
And also the other episode that really had me shook, and I don't know if you had the same example or experience, but the Christmas episode that is a throwback to Mickey's Christmas Carol.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
And there was some things they had to, I don't know, alter about the characters, presumably for some sort of weird copyright reasons, even though it's all Disney.
Yeah.
But like, that was what, even not during Christmas time, that was one of the VHSs I watched the most as a kid. Yeah. So when they called that back so articulately, I like got super emotional.
Sure.
And loved how they did that.
Yeah, I mean, I even loved like how young Donald was played by one of the original Nephew's voice actors, or like frickin' when Donald could talk, he was frickin' Don Cheadle. Like, it's just such a smart show and so underrated. And I know a lot of people wrote it off because it wasn't the original, but I think both are good. I don't think one is better than the other. I think both are good.
I also just have to nerd out for the episodes. Well, specifically the episode where she became corporeal, the Captain Tate as Magica Dispel, because when she started blowing shit up, and it was giving me so much life.
Yeah.
I had to rewind that scene and watch it again and giggle twice as hard.
Also, anytime you put David Tennant and Catherine Tate together, no matter what it is always going to be gangbusters. So
yes.
Well, now that we spent 20 minutes talking about DuckTales, before we wrap up the show, I would love for you to talk a little bit about what your plans for the future. I know, Suggestive Language is just getting started, but like, do you have any plans for that show or for other things that you're working on that are around the corner? Is the focus really still just Suggestive Language for now?
In terms of like my energy level, that's sort of my main focus. And I am trying to figure out other ways to use Twitch that aren't gaming, at least until I get the funds for a computer I can actually game on. But I am trying to be on there more frequently and, play around with other ways to use the platform. I'm dabbling very gently with the makings of a memoir of sorts, and sort of still figuring that out for myself, but I've always wanted to write a book, and I really hope I can actually make this one happen. And I'm always trying to resurrect my blog. The art of blogging is a testy thing nowadays, but it's still up there, and I'm still trying to get that popping again. For right now, I mean, I have when the world reopens and I can be on stage again, I am working on transforming one of my currently existing one-man shows into a cabaret. And I think it's going to be good when it happens, but I also hesitant to work on it too hard because I don't see like horizon where it's going to be doable, and I don't like to psych myself up for it too much. So yeah, I think right now suggestive language is sort of just my main focal point, but I'm always hoping for new things to be excited about, whether they are manifested by me or elsewhere.
I love that. Before we wrap up, also, I started asking this a few episodes ago, but because of the insane river of shit that we've waded through, that was 2020 and some of 2021, and we've all had our different. There have been terrible things that have happened all over the place beyond just the pandemic, and it's been hard for a lot of people. I'm curious if you have one standout good moment during the pandemic, something that either couldn't have happened without the pandemic or just something purely good that you look back on fondly that happened during the pandemic that got you through.
I mean, I think the best answer I have for that is the human who was my first guest for my first episode of Suggestive Language, a up-and-coming drag performer named Betty Bottom.
Mm-hmm.
I was working in the South End in Boston, and I found out this drag queen was doing outdoor shows on the corner and going viral on TikTok for it. And I finally got to see a show, and it was just pure joy. And it turns out like she had only been doing drag for like a few months. She was very new to it.
Oh, wow.
And so it seemingly sort of came out of nowhere. And, if you listen to the first episode, which you should, you get a lot more of that backstory. So I don't want to like dump it all here.
Sure.
But that was probably my biggest source of joy in 2020. And the only other things I can really put in that category are things that we've already discussed,
Sure.
Switch, Breath of the Wild, all that.
Cool. I love that. I think it's important to like look on the good. It's very easy to get bogged down in the nightmare of it all. And like I've only started doing this recently, but I've had a lot of guests talk about the pandemic, especially performers who are struggling to figure out new avenues during it. And so I think it's important to talk about the good as well. Lucas, thank you so much for being here. It's a delight to see your face. I'm delighted for folks to hear your face, I guess, when this releases. But before we totally close the show, why don't you tell folks where they can find you, they can find Suggestive Language, and they can check out all the cool stuff you do.
Absolutely. So in terms of me as a person, you can find me at intellectualhomosexual.com. That's my blog. I am at Intellectual Homosexual on Instagram and Twitch, and then at Intellect Homo on Twitter. I have a Patreon that I don't give enough love to, also Intellectual Homosexual. And if you want to follow more specifically Suggestive Language, I'm at suggestive_pod on Twitter and at Suggestive Language on Instagram. I managed to get that. I'm very proud of it.
Yay.
Yeah, you can catch Suggestive Language live on Monday nights on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then episodes come out on your standard podcast platforms of choice every Wednesday. Though not Apple Podcasts yet, but I'm working on it.
Yeah, Apple is a pain in the ass.
The time you hear this, it might be up there.
Okay, there you go. Well, again, Lucas, thank you. We have a saying on the show that I would love for you to say to close us out. It's this idea that as long as we're creating, as long as we're making something, life isn't that bad. So could you please sign us off with the phrase, music is life and life is good.
Music is life and life is good.
That's it for this episode of CPOV Autographs. Our theme music is by Michael Kill. Our logo was designed by Case Aiken and Joey Amons. If you liked the show, please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. It's a great way to help us reach more listeners. Questions, comments, or guest recommendations? Email mr.matt.storm@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at CPOV Autographs. Thank you so much for listening.
Hello and welcome to Massively Affected, where I, Josh Silverman, bring on a guest and ask them the not-so-simple question, why Mass Effect? Massively Affected is a podcast dedicated to exploring our personal legacies with Mass Effect. From our origin stories with the series to the impact it had on our lives, everything is on the table when it comes to the series, which includes the trilogy, Andromeda, books, comics, fanfics, and whatever else the future may hold. During the debut first season, I was joined by Reignite's own Matt Storm, as well as a cavalcade of amazing guests, including Kate Sanchez from But Why Though, Greg Haynes of Able Gamers, Ken the Shepherd of Fanbyte and Normandy FM, and many more wonderful guests with Mass Effect stories to tell. Each episode dives into the experience of a guest and myself, and I hope you join us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you may find podcasts. You can share your own stories and find the show on Twitter by searching @MassAffectedPod.
Hey, Nerf herders.
You sure you want to go with that?
Hey, everyone.
There we go. More inviting.
Have you ever had a movie that you really wanted to love, but something holds you back?
Or one that you did love in spite of a flaw?
Well, I'm Case Aiken.
And I'm Sam Alisea.
And on Another Pass, we sit down with cool guests to look at movies that we find fascinating.
But flawed.
And we try to imagine what could have been done when they were made to give them that little push.
We're not experts. We just believe in criticism.
Constructive criticism.
Sure.
So come take another pass at some movies with us.
And every now and then, we can celebrate movies that did it on their own, too.
You can find us at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Pass it on.
CPOV.
certainpov.com.